Now, on to our next speaker, Dr. Mandeep Rai, and her topic, the concept and fostering spirituality at the workplace. Mandeep Rai is a global authority on values, working with companies, institutions, and individuals around the world. She began a career in the private sector and then moved working with the United Nations, the European Commission, grassroots NGOs before setting up the UAE's first media venture capital fund. She also holds a PhD in global values and is the author of the book, as you can see there on your screen, The Values Compass, What 101 Countries Teach Us About Purpose, Life, and Leadership. Over to you, Dr. Mandeep Rai.
Thank you. I really appreciate the introduction. I really appreciate being on in this day with you all. I loved your panel, and she just blew me away just now. So it's a hard act to follow, and I'm not even going to try to follow. But it's what we experience all the time in life, that we think we have to be like great leaders or be led by great leaders. I'm just going to flip this whole conversation around and say that actually we are the leaders. So when I was listening earlier today, I was hearing about what our bosses are like, what it's like in our workplace, whether we're inspired or not to do what you love or to make what you're doing what you love. Now, I just wonder whether actually we are our own leaders and we are our own bosses. And I would say that we absolutely are, and it's in our thinking. So when you first start in an organization, it seems to matter what you know. Your IQ, your intellectual quotient, seems to be important. But I would say that as you get higher and higher into the organization, it's not about what you know anymore. There's no way that you could have all the capacity to know all the things you need to know as you progress up. So as you start working with people and get into middle management, you're then into emotional quotient, like knowing how other people are reacting, knowing how you should respond. Above that, as you get into management, you're then into like an organizational quotient, knowing how to manage up, knowing how to manage down, how to look after the situation. But let's say you're now at a global leadership level. Then kicks in your decency quotient. I would say that decency, that ability to being the type of leader that inspires you is what you want to kick into your life right now. So that means operating from a values perspective, from a values basis. Now, these are words that can feel easily said and hard to do. There are some practical ways we can just bring ourselves into alignment right here, right now, immediately. I say if there were 5 things in your life to concentrate on, and I'm going to put them in order, it would be sleep, to make sure that you're rested. Honestly, because if your brain's not functioning and your brain doesn't function without enough sleep, everything else goes out of work. Then, as soon as you wake up, if it's possible, movement. It's not that meditation and prayer aren't important, but if your body is not circulating, if the system's not operating, then everything else is a lot more difficult. So whether that means going for a walk or whether it's going for a run or something, or yoga, there is so much scientific basis on how movement is extremely important. And then the prayer, the meditation, everything else can sit in a cleaner, clearer body. So the third would be actually watching what we eat. I'm afraid to say we all eat too much. Generally, we eat much more than we need to. We can check our portion control. If you try to eat 3/4 of what we eat right now, you'll find that actually you can manage just as well. And then even less, and you can manage even better. You have even better clarity. Then the fourth, meditation or prayer or gratitude, whatever works for you. Spirituality is not something that can be prescribed to you. It's what works for you. It's what uplifts you. And so when those other pieces are in place, you find that your body goes into alignment, and the way you're able to, whether it be breathing, whether it be any form of practice, it just works much better. And then the fifth would be vibrant dialogue. Exactly what we're doing now. It is so hard to be uplifted when you don't have the interaction and the dialogue that actually feeds our soul. So this brings me on to the journey I'm about to take you into, which is a values-based journey. So I would say, once your kind of system is in alignment, you find that you are operating at 110, 120%, which isn't even possible. Like, you make decisions with greater clarity and greater certainty. Then, whether your situation is difficult or easy, the micro and macro decisions you're making will be made with a sense of being at peace with yourself first. So then I take you into a values-based journey. Now, if you're not from India, please put in the country that you're from, because within this journey, I take you around the world to like 101 different countries. I don't know if you can see there, but each country that I take you to has been distilled into a different value, whether that be honesty, authenticity, creativity, communication. These things, what we're finding now, especially right now when the world is becoming more virtual as well as physical, is that our personal and professional life is becoming almost the same, like they're becoming intertwined. The leaders that we respect are the leaders that have that integrity both in their professional life as well as their personal life. They're not afraid of saying if something is not going right personally at home, or they're not afraid of saying they don't know, or they're not afraid of saying, actually, I'm going to hire people that are even better than myself. And in some cases, I might even pay people more than I pay myself, because an empowering leader, and that's you and I, are the ones that empower the people on either side of ourselves. It's not about waiting for a great leader. It's not about being managed up. It's about each of us inspiring one another to be our very best selves. So then let me take you through this idea of thinking what values are the ones that get you going, that really fill your heart with joy. Not the ones that your parents have been talking about, or not the ones that your religious institution always talks about, or not what is promoted on social media or that your friends think are important, but what makes your heart sing. And those values, it's a very simple process actually, and I can take you through it at any point. And when we do that and we think about what makes our heart sing, what's even more important is to then prioritize those values. To think, what is it that's number one? What's my, not even what's most, it could be what's most important, or what's the most important if I'm going to reach whatever goal. Now, what are the goals in life? Is it that we're thinking about the next 20, 30 years that we're going to be working? Or is it that your body and your mind and your community need to be in place and thriving for your whole entire life? And if we take that objective, what are the decisions we're going to make then? How will we treat the people around us then? Because ultimately, that's the life that you're leading. So I almost encourage you to think about the words you would want said at your funeral, your eulogy. What's the type of person that is leaving this planet? Who did you want to be? And we work from there. We work from that person that you know you are, that you're capable of being, that the story you want written, we start writing it now. And so those 5 values, I encourage you to basically choose 5 values. Too many and you're split in too many different directions. Too few and the balance is almost not there. It's nice to have a variety. 5 is enough to manage, but when you prioritize those 5, have a number 1, and then something that's a little bit less important, and then something that's even less important, it becomes easier to then make those decisions. This is why the Dalai Lama said that this book leads you to success, fulfillment, happiness, and harmony. Harmony, why? Because you know what is the most important, and you haven't put everything as equally important. When we put everything at an equal level, then you're still pushed and pulled, you're torn, it becomes still, even though you've chosen your values, if you've put them as equally important, those decisions are still hard to make. But I'm talking about the micro and macro decisions that are making your life. Where you work, who you marry, how you spend your day, how you spend your morning. All of those are much easier to make when you've identified your core values and you have prioritized your core values. And this is what the values compass does. It almost looks at your operating system, helps you do that thinking right from the get-go, so that then every time you're in a situation or in an interaction, it's easier for you. You've already done the work. You already know which way you're going to turn. And you're not having to assess or reassess or think on the spot or manage at that time. And so I would say that I really did want this to be an interactive session. So please put your thoughts or put your questions in the chat, because this is meant to be serving you. And whenever we think about what the person we want to be, one excellent way of doing this is to think, who do I admire? Who are my heroes? They don't have to be far away. They can be people. It could be your parents. It could be someone in history. It could be someone, someone you've never met or someone, but the guarantee that the values that they have are the values that you admire too, the values that you think are important. And the leaders that we have don't have to be the leaders that we're working directly above us. They can be, you choose your kind of core team that is either your advisory team or the people that you look up to and that are guiding you. And those are the principles that you're going to use. Those are the values that you're going to use in your day-to-day. So I just want to do a quick time check and see whether at this point am I meant to be taking questions, or am I meant to, would you like me to continue? I just want to check.
It'd be lovely to continue, because I think it's very interesting that everyone here, then how you take forward the idea of the eulogy, and of course distilling the 5 values we talk about.
Okay, so I'm going to say that firstly, I'm just going to describe how these values come about. So when I looked at each of these countries, let's say I look at Japan, and I see the way respect permeates every part of Japanese society. All the way in India, I'm not surprised that I'm here with the India Leadership Academy speaking about spirituality, because faith and spirituality, just like respect in Japan, faith and spirituality permeate every part of Indian society. And so when you think about your values, you can see parts of the world that embody those values really to a whole nother level. And you can see, is how would it be if I bring that level of respect into my life? Or how would it be if I bring that level of spirituality or honesty or health or excellence? And so the eulogy idea is simply that it helps you think about, what do I want said at my deathbed? What would that article look like that goes out into the newspaper and says this person that we are so sad to have lost had this, or left this legacy behind? And then the way you're living your life, instead of thinking about your next promotion or up until your retirement or up until even your whichever job you're in, you're then thinking about, right now, how do I want to set myself up so the rest of my life is speaking the language or telling the story I want it to tell? We call this moment of the pandemic the Great Reset, but how are you going to press that reset button? What are you choosing at this point so that it's not being chosen for you, just like everything else seems to be chosen for us, our circumstances, our parents, where we're born, how it's done. But at this point, what are you choosing? And this is a really pivotal point. I'm really glad that we're having this conversation right now. And I'm glad you're on the screen with me, Shivraj.
No, and Dr. Mandeep, if you like you say in your book, you've traversed 100 countries and kind of the values that you discovered. So you said Japan, there's respect, there's faith and spirituality. In India, is there a common thread amongst all that kind of defined how these values actually manifest themselves?
Yes, I would say there's a sense of wanting to be like humanity evolving all the time to be better and better and better than it was yesterday. And even if we just concentrate on 1% better than we were yesterday, that is already more than enough. Like, not to put your goals and your ideals so high that they become unachievable or that they deflate you, but rather to think, yesterday I reacted like this and tomorrow I'm going to react like this because I've, a failure, what is the definition of a failure? A failure is only if you haven't learned. That is it. In fact, the most empowering leaders are those leaders who allow us to fail. If you really want to make some great innovation or great leap forward, you have to allow yourself to fail at times. And then all you need in those times is the courage to be able to accept, not to see it as a personal failure, not to see it as you failing, but simply as you learning, growing, and evolving. So I think that the similarity that I see around the world is this wanting to evolve, but how we do it, I think it almost requires us to be courageous leaders in our workplace, for us to lead from within our workplace. The onus and the responsibility is not on anyone else. It's really not on your boss or the 3 bosses above you or the CEO. It is on you.
And clearly, like you said, the Great Reset has put a reset on how we think about leading up or down, right? So how's that, have you sort of had a sense of how that has also changed the way corporate settings view spirituality?
That it's, I think corporate settings, normally the word spirituality is not really used in corporate settings. You can see my career has been fairly corporate, and the number of times I've heard the word, and if I say spirituality, even, at least in the past, it wasn't perceived as necessary or a domain that you should be bringing into the workplace. Mm-hmm. But recently, I've seen those organizations that are really successful, like, for example, that whole IQ, EQ organizational decency quotient. That was a conversation with Ajay Banga of MasterCard, the CEO of MasterCard. I've seen just in the last few weeks that those organizations that are very clear about their supply chain and have a very clean supply chain are the ones that are progressing and progressing fast. So, for example, eating in a place that you know that the food has just been grown outside, or they're getting it completely locally produced. There are no pesticides. There is no there's a sense of this is being made or being produced in the way that's complete harmony of its environment. We are seeing climate change at a level that we've never seen before. We're seeing levels of heat and fire and floods that we've never seen before. We cannot deny this. And unless we're in harmony, and I would say that spirituality, to be in complete harmony with your body and with your planet, that only then are we really going to see that then we're thriving. So pursuing success and cutting out, as Harish said before, it's like having autoimmune diseases or cutting off our soul in order to pursue what our mind is saying. Or, it's almost like chopping off your right arm instead of using just your left arm. Or even growing something. If you're not aware of the moon cycles and the planetary cycles and trusting how the earth needs to replenish itself, then that level of distrust, or the level of which we're trying to control and micro control, I think is almost cutting off our own foundation.
And you do see a correlation with successful businesses being value driven. And I think, do you believe that is actually now taking spirituality into the workplace without, like you said, making it overtly something that they're aware of?
100%. It is working with true integrity throughout, like having complete alignment throughout the whole organization. So yes, you don't have to use the word spirituality because it can put people off. But what you can do is, and I've done this with so many organizations, I find that when organizations become really clear about what they stand for, and then they communicate that well, and they recruit according to that, it brings a level of alignment. Because as someone said earlier to this in today, that when we're working for something much greater than ourselves, it's like a different energy possesses us. You don't feel like you're going to work. Work shouldn't feel like a job. Exactly. It becomes a vibrational point. And at that point, you find that how you work is drastically different. And I wouldn't call it work. I would call it your passion. And when you walk in, or you log it, yes, go on, sorry.
No, I think that's very important in today's context as well, isn't it? Where we're all working remotely, but we're still needing to find a purpose to continue what we're doing.
Yes, but do we need to continue what we're doing, or do we need to change what we're doing? Do we need to bring in that level of purpose, mission, passion? And that's in us. You don't even need to necessarily have a drastic change. The change in your mindset is all you need, and all the other things would just fall into place. And your world would change instantly. It isn't even some big decision that has to create the change. You making your mindset change will change everything else. And that's what I mean about the values. It's like sometimes people can feel like, well, how do I make this mindset change? Or where do I start? Or which direction do I go in? For that to feel really in alignment with what matters to you, what you truly, not even just believe in, what your foundation is. For it to be in alignment with that, and almost like what's operating your subconscious, you open it up, you look at it, and then you make a choice. Is this serving me? Or is it that I have to choose something different? And that process of choosing your values, taking you through that, and coming out with those 5 values that are prioritized really brings clarity to what is operating you in your subconscious.
And finally, when looking at organizations and institutions you've interacted with who've done this successfully, what have the outcomes been?
Firstly, when they're recruiting, especially young people are attracted and they stay. What we are finding is that all the traditional things that seem to matter, like money or working conditions or whatever, they matter less to young people. Young people actually want their values to be met. They want it to matter to them. And so when a company does this process successfully, how they recruit, who they recruit, and how long they stay it just pays off in dividends. So you don't have to count the time and the pennies and everything now. You find that it actually serves your purpose in the long term.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Mandeep Rai, for that fabulous insight, because I think the idea of building value-driven organizations really changes the dynamic of the workplace.
In a very practical way.
Thank you.